Oh my goodness, as you just heard, I am sitting with the incredible Renee Stribbell, and we know each other outside of just the podcast. We've done coaching together, some things like that. But you have a big one that when we were talking, you were like, this is what people need to learn and what they need to talk about. Renee, what is the thing you wished people had talked about that you wished wasn't so shameful and a secret?
Probably around food, and that it's not a bad or a good thing. It's just a thing,
Right?
right?
Food is not the devil.
It's not the devil. It's just a thing.
Right? So let's dive into this because
Mm,
this is a big topic for a lot of people is eating and food and diets and body image and self-worth and all of those things. And especially anybody who is raised like 70s, 80s, 90s with
mhm.
like the Kate Mosses of the world and this belief of what we had to look like. And man, I don't know a mom that wasn't in Weight Watchers or those tops
Yeah.
classes or doing the like Jane Fonda aerobics, Tuesday, Thursday mornings at 10 a.m. at the Aqua Center, right?
Hmm.
Like this is your childhood too. This is
Yeah.
very much how we were raised. For you, where did your journey with food start? And tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, my journey with food actually started when I was quite young. I was 7 years old. I was a bit pudgy. I look back at pictures and I really wasn't, but I mean, I believed I was very, very pudgy. And I was kind of the belief system, because that was the belief system that was generated, was if you're thin, you're
100%.
happy, right? If you're
Oh,
thin, if you looked good, if your hair was done, if you had a nice
yes.
shapely body, if you had all this kind of stuff, then you're happy. And if you weren't, then you were unhappy. And I think I began dieting at that age, right? And it was just, I started to develop this relationship with food that was, there was good food and there was bad food. And if I ate food, if I ate the bad food, therefore I was bad.
Yeah.
But I really liked the bad food. I enjoyed it. It was tasty. And then it turned into this thing where food became that comfort for me at a very young age. I had big emotions. I wore my heart on my sleeve. I still do. I feel everything, and food was that thing that kind of just maybe settled me down a little bit and became a friend. It became that thing that I would use to just kind of get through those big times in my life, those big emotions.
Yeah.
Right. So it started when I was 7, and then the shame started to build with it too, because I would gain weight because I was eating, but I didn't want to stop eating because it was the only thing I had in my life that made me feel good, even for short, tiny bits of time. And so as I got older, it's just the cycle. Like you're always on a diet. You're thinking about a diet, you're eating the foods on the diet and restricting, and then you know, you're breaking the diet, you're cheating, which is a word, is just
Oh, the worst word in diet history
I
ever.
cheated. I cheated. Oh my God, I'm so bad. And then you get this shame cycle and it just builds and builds. And one thing about an eating disorder, it's not something all of a sudden you just wake up and you have it.
No,
It's built
no.
over time, and you don't even realize, like I didn't realize I had an actual eating disorder until I was well into my late 20s. I just thought that I couldn't control myself. I couldn't lose weight. Like
Yeah.
I just couldn't lose weight. So it was one of those things where I didn't even realize that I had some unhealthy connections with food, you
Well,
know?
and let's break it down a little bit more. Like, so a few things, even just what you said, like cheating. We are ingrained even in school, like cheating is awful and it's
Mhm.
bad and it's horrible. Well, because it goes against morally and ethically who we are as humans to cheat. So then when we incorporate that into an action or an activity, even in our eating,
Mhm.
it's like, okay, so I'm having this day where I actually enjoy my food or I eat things I quote unquote shouldn't,
Yeah.
but now I've attached this horrible, disgusting word to it, which just adds so much shame. Like,
Mhm.
just like the shame you're attaching to the food before you put it in your body. Like, that is so ridiculously unhealthy.
Mhm.
But also, going back, what was your parents' relationship like with food?
I can't really comment on my dad, because I never really noticed, but my mom was the same. She had, just a really unhealthy relationship with food, and she struggled with her weight. And she struggled with, she didn't want me to go through the same thing, right? Because kids, when you're young, they're kind of can be jerks, and they can be mean if you're overweight and things like that, and
Totally.
her intention was pure. She just, she didn't want me to go through that. And she struggled with it too. So, her relationship with food was very similar to what I was building, like a lot of shame around to it. There was good and bad. So you were bad if you ate this. And I think that's a really important distinction. It's not you shame yourself. If you eat a bad food or you cheat, then you therefore are bad. Like this is like right in the core of who you are. You are a bad person if you do this, and that was a belief system that was ingrained in me at a very young age, and not just from my mom, but just everyone. That's just the way it was.
Oh, society as a whole.
Right. And it was just, I didn't really, I was surrounded by people that had an unhealthy relationship with food and body image,
Oh, 100%. So when did you realize that it was such a big issue?
I
You
realized,
talk about realizing you had an eating disorder in your late 20s. So for most people listening, they're probably thinking bulimia, anorexia, they're thinking those ones, but you had gone in the opposite direction.
I had a binge eating disorder. And so the amount of volume of food that I could ingest in one period of time was like astronomical, but so I probably should say that the reason that I had that is because I hated myself. And when I looked in the mirror, I just saw this fat, and one of the things that people would always say to me, "Oh, you have such a pretty face." And they would
isn't that
say
the
it,
greatest
right?
backhanded compliment ever?
Right? And they'd say it in such a way with that, like, "Oh, I'm so sorry."
I've gotten that since the aneurysm.
Right? Yeah. So it
You're
was like,
beautiful for a fat girl.
right?
That's my personal favorite. I'm like, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah.
You just hugged me and slapped me at the same time.
Right? So it got to the point where I'd look in the mirror and I'd never look lower than my chin. Like I would just look at my face and I'd never look at my body because I couldn't. When I looked at my body, I was disgusted. And so it's kind of a funny thing because when I looked at my body and I was disgusted, I remember watching the movie about Karen Carpenter and the Carpenters, and she had anorexia bulimia.
Yeah.
And most people would watch that movie and just be like, "Oh my goodness." I thought of it as the best diet in the universe. When I watched that movie, I was like, that's it, right? I'm going to just not eat. And if I do eat, I'm going to throw up. And so I was like, this is perfect, because the bulimia, like binge eating disorders, the difference really is binge eating is you still binge with bulimia, but you don't throw it up. You just eat it.
You just actually eat it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I discovered that I wasn't really good. I didn't enjoy not eating. I was like, I couldn't do it. And then, but then I was like, I love food so much. So I'm going to binge and purge. And I didn't like purging. So then I kind of threw that out the window and I just binged. And so I could eat. I mean, my God, I remember this is what triggered the whole thing. I was with I don't think I was married yet. I may have been. I don't think I was, but I was with my husband at the time. And I had gone to my, yet again, Weight Watchers meeting because I had been to every diet.
Yeah.
I've done every diet imaginable. And I went to the meeting and we're doing a little group session and we're talking, just sharing. And I said, do you ever, I think about it now, and I no wonder people looked at me with like I had 10 heads, but I said, do you ever go to the pantry and just open the door and stuff your face to the point that you're going to be sick? And then you be sick and then you go back and eat more? And all 40 people in the room looked at me like I had 10 heads.
Oh, that's funny.
Right? And I was like, oh, this isn't normal. I thought it was normal. I thought this is what people did. And I just didn't have enough willpower to lose weight. That was the problem. It wasn't that I had an issue. I didn't think.
The willpower.
Right. And so I went home I went to the pantry to begin to stuff my face. And I stood there and I just started to cry because I just realized at that moment that what I was doing was not normal. And I said to my husband at the time, I'm like, I wonder if, like, I've heard of 12-step programs. Do you think that there's a 12-step program like for people like me? Because I said to him, I'm like, I think I have a problem with food. And he's like, yeah, like he knew, but I said, do you think that there's a program out there for me? And that's what brought me to Overeaters Anonymous. OA. That was in 2010.
Yeah.
And that's what brought me. I was like, oh my goodness, I have a problem with food. You know?
Huge. And with that, there's often when there is, and we don't have to get into it, but often when there is, an eating disorder or a hatred of your body or hatred, there's usually a trauma attached to that, right? Where it's something has happened, and it doesn't even have to be a huge thing, but something has happened, right? That has caused us to view ourselves as not worthy or ugly or gross. I mean, for me, it was overhearing a conversation about talking about how curvy I was already at 9 years old,
Mm,
and how it was a problem, and how could my mom cover me better for when I was swimming with my cousins,
mm,
right? It wasn't even a huge trauma in the eyes of society, but that at that age already had imprinted so hard in my brain
mhm,
that my body
mhm.
was gross, right? So with that, I know Overeaters Anonymous has been it's an interesting topic for you. So let's let you guide where this goes. So what happened with that and your relationship with food after you joined OA?
So, I went to my first meeting, and if it OA is a 12-step program, so everybody's quite familiar with those, and Overeaters Anonymous does follow the Alcoholics Anonymous big book. So,
Mhm.
um, to be honest with you, the first time I went to a meeting, I sat there. I didn't really say a word, but actually it felt good because the people in that room were saying what I was saying. They were experiencing what I was
Yeah,
experiencing, and they were open about it, and some of them laughed about it, and it was just this, like, okay, these people understand me. Like, I didn't know I had an eating disorder, and then I went into that meeting and I was like, and I had already knew, and I was like, oh boy, this is something I knew. Now I'm like, oh dear, this is something I have to look at. And then those people were like, yeah, we do the same things you do with food. And it was
yeah,
like, I felt for the first time in my life, I felt safe and I felt heard. And I was like, I'm not alone.
yeah.
Yeah. And it was really, really good. And I was in OA for a bit, and then I left, and then I came back over a period of, well, it's 2022. So 11 last year I left OA for good, but it was 11
Yeah.
years. 11 years of my life was in and out of OA. And so we'll get to when I left in a bit, but what OA taught me for a really long time was that, you can work through a lot of this kind of stuff when you have support. There's a lot of great things that I learned from OA, and there was a camaraderie and a community that I had, and it was
100%.
mine. It
Yeah.
was mine. And I could be myself in those rooms, and I could say the ridiculous things I did around food, like buying a dozen donuts for my family and eating them before I even got home, you know,
Right.
and then having supper
Yeah.
and, things like that, and binge eating on chocolate bars and things like that. I could do that. And nobody was like, it was just like, yep, did
Nobody
that too.
judged. They just
Nobody
loved you because
judged,
they had been
right?
there. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a lot of that. And I think, um, it was built on that, and I relied on it quite a bit, and it did help me in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of benefits inside of the 12-step program, because one of the
Yeah.
things that it teaches you is, number one, to grow up and stop blaming everybody else for your problems. And right, like,
Yep.
so there was a lot of that,
Own
and
your shit.
own your shit, keep your side of the street clean, all of that kind of stuff. The 12 steps, the premise of it is fabulous.
Yeah.
So I grew, and it got to the point in 2000, actually, when I went through, now one of the things that I might just jump a bit, is one of the things about an eating disorder or something like that, it encompasses your entire life. Every decision that you make, everything that you do that is always in the background guiding you, right? Because you have
Mm-hmm.
no self-worth, you have no self-esteem, you have no idea who you are, what you stand for. You get into relationships because you're trying to find somebody that can feed that insecure part of you, right? So the
Yeah.
decisions that you make, the businesses you do, everything, it's all skewed by this.
Yeah.
And so what happened was is when I put the food down and I started working the 12 steps, a lot of things came clear that, you know, I'd made some decisions in my life that I probably wouldn't have made if I wasn't heavily involved in the eating disorder and all of the mental stuff that goes with it. And so I had to make some tough decisions in my life, and OA actually helped me through that, right? And so because I wasn't eating over it, I had to put the food down and I had to actually face some of these things.
Well, you couldn't run for your emotions anymore.
No.
That's often the hardest, right? Is
Mm.
with addiction, and I see this every day with clients, right? Is with addiction, when you're no longer participating in your addiction, you still have to find something to run away from your emotions in,
Mhm.
right? So either you have to actually like, sit and face what you were running from in the first place, or you just have to find, or people often will just find a new addiction,
Yeah.
right? They'll just find something else to take their mind off of it, to drown out those emotions and the voices in their head, to still protect themselves.
Yeah,
Because so much of the addiction, I believe, is just it's a protective mechanism. You
absolutely.
just happen to stumble upon that thing that calmed your brain for a second.
Well, and the
Yours
funny
just
thing is
happened to be food.
it happened to be food. Food was the primary thing, but let me tell you, everything that I did in my life was to escape who I was and
Yeah,
who I didn't want to be me. I hated myself. I hated every part of me. I had no
right?
worth. So yeah, it was food, but let me tell you, I worked way too hard. I probably drank too much. I did all of these things to excess. Everything was to excess,
Yeah,
and I shopped too much. I spent too much money. I did all of that kind of stuff, but food was the primary one for sure. That was the one. But when I started putting that stuff down, what do you think happened to the other stuff? I kind of went a little nutty for a while,
they
right?
all just got real bad.
They just got real bad, but I was refusing to see that.
Yeah,
Um, and then, I mean, OA was great. I lost 120 pounds. I felt good. So I used to, and I'll give you like near the end of my OA experience. I One of the things is, I'm addicted to sugar. And so one of the things that they say, and it's common, is I'm powerless over food and my life is unmanageable. That's a standard saying in OA,
yeah,
because you admit that you are powerless and you need to get help really and find a higher power to help you through this, right?
yeah,
So, and some people it's God, some people it's universe, some people whatever it is. To find there's basically it's just ask for help is really what it means.
totally.
And surrender and trust that you can't control this thing. And so that's the belief system that I believed was for the rest of my life, I will be powerless over food and my life will be unmanageable if I ingest the addictive foods that cause me to be powerless or engage in binge eating behavior or anything like that. So it was so deeply ingrained in me that I couldn't see, like I was a compulsive eater. I was an overeater. I was going to be that for the rest of my life. And food ironically became the most powerful thing in my life because I gave it power when I was a kid, but when I put it down, I gave it more power and I had no idea that that's what I was doing. Because when
Hmm.
you say you are powerless over something, you mean that it has power over you. It controls every facet of you. And when I realized that thanks to your help, I was like, oh crap. Like, I've given food everything. I got to the point where I had to text my food every day to a sponsor. I could not deviate from what I had indicated. If I did, I had to text them and give them a very good reason as to why. And I would come visit my boyfriend and I would bring a grocery store with me. Like I would bring all of the food that I had to eat because I had to weigh and measure and record and report everything that went in my mouth. I couldn't go, oh my,
Well, and food that was actually making you physically ill.
It was healthy
Like you
food.
literally, it was healthy food. But do you remember
Yeah.
the day that I was like, what if you just didn't? And you were like, what? And I'm like, it's physically making you ill to
Yeah.
eat what you're having to eat. And you're like, but this is what they told me I have to eat to stay healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. I was physically sick, like, and my stomach was in pain all the time. And like my digestive system was a disaster. And so, but I was losing weight. I felt great. And, one of the things that OA did teach me is once I lost 120 pounds, I finally went, I can lose weight. I can lose weight.
Yeah.
I convinced myself for years that I couldn't, I wasn't capable of, but that
Yeah.
taught me that I could. I know what I need to do, just not to that extreme. But it was like, do you know what it's like to go to somebody's house and bring a grocery store, or go to somebody's house and they've made you dinner and you have to say no? Or you want to plan a vacation, but you're terrified because you do not know what the restaurants are in Mexico and you don't know how you're going to eat there, and the
Huh?
stress that it causes for the people around you. It was just like, but I had accepted that that was what I was going to have to do to remain sane, right? Like that's what we're taught. And then I got to the point, and another thing is when you're in OA, you're part of this little club, right? You're part of this little club, and normal people just don't understand. So you kind of get in your little bubble of people that
Yeah.
they get you and nobody else gets you, and they don't have to understand. You know what else I found out is I taught my son, and this is probably one of the biggest things that shifted for me, was I had taught my son that I had some allergy to food, that I was different than other people. And I created, here's the funny thing. I went to OA to stop having an eating disorder, but I think I actually created one. But
Yeah,
I
I
taught to
agree.
my son that there was something that was wrong with me.
Yeah.
And does that mean that maybe I taught him that he thought maybe something was wrong with him too? And when I was talking to you, I was celebrating my 1 year. It was 2021. And I'd lost 120 pounds, and I had booked my tummy tuck surgery because I wanted to get rid of all the excess skin, because I loved my body. I just didn't love the extra skin, which, by the way, that's not how it works. But you either love it all or you don't. It's just the way it is. So
Yeah.
I booked that, celebrated my 1 year, and I was talking to you on the day that it was my 1 year of abstinence. So clean and sober essentially is what it means. Is my absence. I followed this weight and measure food plan for a year, lost the weight, and I was celebrating. And you posed a question to me and it rocked my entire world. And by this time, you and I had been working together, what, a year by this point? No,
Oh,
like 6 months.
no, not even. It wasn't very long at that point.
No. And you said to me, like, you know that OA doesn't own your recovery. And I looked at you and you shattered me. You shattered everything. And I was like, and you were like, you did it. That's yours, not them. And I sat there and I didn't even know, because I think, if you were, correct me if I'm wrong, I was talking about how OA saved my life. She's like, no, they didn't. You did.
No, I was like, you did. You did
You
the
did.
work.
Yeah. And I was like, nope,
Yeah.
nope, couldn't have done it myself. I had, and all this kind of stuff. And it shattered me. And then it eventually got to a couple of, well, not even that long. We talked about me leaving OA. And then one day I was like, I'm done. April 1st. I was done. A month
Well,
later.
we had talked about, yes, I remember that day when I said that, and the flood of emotions that came across your face, from like rage to fear to more rage to like excited and then back to rage. Like you were like, yeah, it definitely shattered you in that moment. But the conversation that happened after was, what if you actually owned your own recovery? What if you took charge of it? And what if you stopped identifying as a compulsive binge eater and stopped identifying as all those things, so that you stopped creating it?
Yes. I didn't know how to handle that when you said that. I just
Right?
didn't. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't. And it basically, it shocked me, but I think partly it hit me so hard and shocked me so much because you were right. Right. You were right. And I knew that. But I didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And I there was a tiny eensy weensy glimmer of hope that maybe I could be normal.
Yeah.
And I couldn't see how I was going to get there. I had no idea how I was going to get there. But I knew that I had you. And
You're
I
like, I can
knew
call you and be like, what the hell, dog?
what is going on, right? So,
Yeah.
so I get emotional about this, but it just rocked me to the core, because I believed that I was just going to be a compulsive eater for the rest of my life. That's just the way it was. And then I made the decision to leave OA. I was terrified, and it was really funny because I called my sponsor and told her, and I said, I've made the decision to go my own way. I'm leaving OA, and she was just like, it's not going to work, essentially, was the general message. Like, you're going to fail, and you're going to eat again, and you're going to get fat, and you're going to, all this kind of stuff was essentially the message that was given to me. And because that's what we believe. When somebody leaves the program, we kind of like, oh dear, yeah, they're back out there.
Yeah.
They're eating again.
Yeah.
And when you talk to somebody, a lot of times when you call in or you talk to somebody in the program, like, how's your food? Like, usually first questions, how's your food eating? How's your abstinence? How, like, it's not like, how are you? Like, how are you doing? Right. And it's a really interesting thing. And when I left OA, it's kind of like a really bad divorce at first, because you're just like anger.
Totally.
You're like angry, and then you're trying to figure out what the problem is when you've been programmed for that long to believe certain things. To break that programming is really hard psychologically and emotionally, and you're very lost on who you are. And I was so lost. I was so lost. I didn't know. And I was angry because I felt that OA took so much from me. They took 10 years of my life. Where would I have been if I didn't go there? And I was really, really angry for a long time. And then you and I did some exercises around food. And I remember I was talking to you one day, and I think we were just talking about, like, I really wanted nachos and cheese or something. I can't remember what it was.
You wanted chips and salsa.
You
wanted chips and salsa. You're like, but I can't. That's bad.
That's bad. And it's not at my mealtime. Like, I can't have snacks.
Yeah.
And you're like, go get one. And I was like,
I remember that.
And and if anybody's listening to this and resonates with this, is, you think about it, like, I think about it now and I can laugh about it, but let me tell you, in that moment, it was the scariest thing that I had to do, because I had believed 150% with every fiber of my being that if I ate that one chip, if I ate that chip, then my life would fall apart, that I would unravel, that I would lose it all.
Well, you'd been taught, though, that then you broke your abstinence, and then you lost your recovery from eating that one chip. And I remember that's when we had talked about, what is food? What is it? Food doesn't hold emotions. It doesn't hold any of that. It's just food. Like, it's not the devil. It is a singular potato chip. But when we've been raised where emotion is so attached to food, food's not in the like, emotions aren't in the food. Emotions are attached to the food.
Yes.
Right? Where, like, we know that at birthdays we have cake, right? We know that at, like, all of these celebratory times in our lives, all of these things, we reward ourselves with it. We eat when we're sad. We eat when we're happy. We eat when we're grieving. We eat when we're celebrating. Like, it becomes a whole thing where food doesn't actually have emotion. It's just food.
Just food.
Right? And I know that was the exercise that we had gone through that day. It was like, look at the chip. Like, what does it feel? Like, what are all the emotions coming up? And then we faced them. So talk about that and how we did that.
Well, like, you made me look at the chair. I don't mean to minimize it, but
no,
now
it
it's
sounds totally silly thinking about it, but in that moment, it was so big for you in that moment.
It was so big. And I'm looking at the chip and the salsa, and you're like, okay, what? I'm like, it's a chip. And you made me describe it and things like that. And I really wanted it. I wanted the chips and salsa. And And I looked at the chip, and it represented to me was failure. It represented a break in my abstinence. It represented that if who I was as a person, I was making a decision. I was defying, I was defying this. I was bad. I was cheating. I was,
Those words.
oh God, and I was just a failure,
Yeah.
and I was just worthless, and I'm destroying what I've built. And like, I know I'm looking down because I'm pretending I'm looking at the chip that
Yeah.
day, because I had it sitting right here. Actually, I was in this
Yeah, you
room,
did. It was in
and
that room on the corner of
yeah.
that desk.
And so I had it sitting right here, and all of this flood of emotions came. And you're like, okay, let you eat the chip. And I couldn't. I did. And then
You did.
I took a bite, and I broke down. I completely broke down. And everything just came flooding about all of the things that I have just wrecked everything. I have just destroyed everything that I've been trying so hard to do. And I tasted it. I don't remember the taste of the chip. It was good. But I don't remember. I just remember what it symbolized. And at that moment I was terrified. Absolutely terrified of what I'd done. And how many times did I say to you, like, I should go back to AA? I can't do this. It was like going back to an abusive marriage. It was just like, I just had to go back. I didn't know, and it was just like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do this. But I had absolutely no faith in myself. Like,
Right.
none, right? It was just a freaking chip. But at that time, it was my life. It symbolized my life.
And facing the emotions that you had attached to it, then it was like, okay, so these are the emotions that you've been running from. Now, how do we deal with those?
Yeah.
Right? To heal that and take the emotions off of the food so the food can actually just be the medicine that fuels your body.
Right.
And that's it. It doesn't have to be like, we keep coming back to this, but like, food isn't the devil.
No.
Food is a double-edged sword, is what it is. It can be amazing and beautiful, and it can feed you and nourish you and give you energy and keep you going. But if we attach a horrible meaning to it,
it controls you.
it controls you and destroys you.
Absolutely, it does.
So we went through a whole lot of work.
Yes.
Right? And looking back at, what had gone on, the relationship with food, all those things. I remember one time, and I know you've given me permission to share some stuff, right? So I'm not breaking confidence on this.
No, go ahead.
We had gone to a farmer's market together, and we'd been working through so much of like the emotion towards food and the anger towards it and the hatred of it. And I said, okay, so let's test it and see what happens. And we went to a farmer's market, and a really good one with like amazing baking and all of the cheat foods, right?
Yeah.
And as we walked around, every time you'd be like, oh, that, I'm not allowed that. I'd be like, okay, let's buy it.
I know.
And I don't even want to know how many hundreds of dollars we spent on food that day at the farmer's market. But we took it back to my office, and we sat and looked at it, and I was like, take a bite. And one by one, do you remember that? And we went like item by item, and there was no emotion left. And you could eat like one little bite, and you were like, that's enough.
Yes.
Right? You at no point did you need to binge it, right? And we even tested with like, we put a bunch of it even in your room.
Yeah.
Like you took it home with you and had it and threw it out however many days later because you were like, it doesn't hold the power anymore. Like I could take a bite and be okay with it because it wasn't in charge of me. I was in charge of it.
Yes. Yeah, that was huge. That was life-changing, really. And I said to you when we were there that time, and I said, what I got from OA I got to the point where I actually saw what I like, the gifts that I did receive from OA, because there was a lot of gifts. I finally was able to let go of the anger that I attached to it.
Oh, there were
Um,
so many gifts.
oh, so many gifts. And but what I learned is OA is, when I was starting out and I was so deep into it, and I was so broken around it. I didn't know what to do. OA did. Going to OA probably shifted and saved my life at that moment. And
100% it did.
gave me tools and also taught me that I actually was capable, once I realized that it was me doing it. And
Yeah.
but one of the things that I feel that, it can only take you so far. And I think there's a difference between living and having a life. And I think I was surviving and I was living, but was I truly
Mhm.
loving and living my life to the fullest of my capabilities? No,
No.
I was not. And food still had more control over me in a way than it did before, because
Yeah.
it was the only focus that I focused so much on my behaviors around food and what I ate and when I ate and all that kind of stuff. So, um, yeah, it became a really big focus of my life, you know? Um, and so I fully live now, but I wasn't fully living then, you
No.
know? So yeah, but I had to do the hard work,
You
um,
did. You did have to do the hard work.
go through all the traumas. Oh gosh,
Heal some
I can't
pain.
believe
Heal some
heal
pain.
heal the
Right?
pain and go back to the reasons why I used food. I had to go all the way back to those times. And it was like, okay, this is the reason, this is the attachment. This is how I developed an attachment with food. And this is why I have the attachment. And one of the things in 12-step programs, a lot they talk about, and I'll say OA mainly because I haven't really attended the other ones, is, how you got here really doesn't matter. Like, and I think what they're saying is, like, it's nobody's fault that you're here, but how you get there actually really, really matters
Yeah.
if you want to truly heal. And it's not about blame. It's not about saying my parents weren't good enough, they didn't raise me right, or they didn't love me,
No.
or whatever. It's
No, not at
nothing to do
all.
with that. It's, how did I get to the point where I'm making the decisions that I'm making, and how can I let go and forgive and just love and go through compassion and things like that, so that it no longer drives my decisions.
Right?
And that's healing, and that's beautiful.
Oh, and yeah, it's been really cool to be part of your journey with that.
Mhm.
So for somebody else listening that is like, "Oh, okay, so maybe I don't binge eat, maybe I'm not even like fully anorexic, maybe I'm not whatever, but I have a really unhealthy relationship with food." What is one piece of advice or a glimmer of hope or something that you could give them?
If I had to say something, is number one, you're not alone. There's so many of
Yeah.
us, and we need to talk about it more, and we need not to not be ashamed about it. You know, you know,
I don't
yeah.
know very many people that don't have an unhealthy relationship with food.
Mhm. And I
Yeah.
think it's okay it's just to talk about it and let go of the shame around it, because shame will
Yeah.
keep you eating. Shame will keep you in that space. But you're okay. You can handle more than you think you can. And eating whatever it is that day to take away the pain, maybe that's what you need right now, but it doesn't mean that you're going to need it forever. And one day you're going to be able to actually face life and go through hardship and pain and sadness and happiness and all of the emotions without having to suppress those, because all emotions are valid. Being sad, being happy, being angry, being lonely, all of them are valid, and you have every right to feel them. And give
Yes.
yourself permission to do that, because when we eat or we do something like that, we're trying to tamp that part of us down. And food isn't a friend. It may be for the time. Like, I can honestly say there are moments in my life that food probably did save my life. I needed it at that time.
Mhm.
Um, because I probably wouldn't be here today if I wasn't eating. And so I think it's just, forgive yourself, give yourself some love. Um, you don't need to feel shame around it, but if you're not liking the way you feel when you eat, if you find that that's
Yeah.
what you turn to when things happen in your life, then maybe it's a time when you're ready that you can let it go, and it's completely possible to do. But be prepared to do some work. It's not like the easiest thing in the world to do, but if you're ready, there's people that can help you. There's Dawn that can help you. You're not alone. And geez, if you message me, I'll talk to you.
Possible, right? But it's possible. And I think that that's the thing that people just believe. Like, it's really hard not to believe, and I know you and I have both been there, that we're too broken.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
Right? That we're too broken to get help, or we're too hurt. And it's like, no,
sweetheart.
not
No,
at
not
all.
at all.
Not at all. There's always hope. There's always
There's
hope.
always hope.
Right? So to finish this off, thank you so much for sharing and being so vulnerable and talking about it. Because yes, we need to talk about food. We need to talk about shame. This is the whole point of this podcast, right? Is let's have the hard conversations and normalize them. Let's add humanity to them and normalize them. So let's do just some like rapid fire, just quick, silly questions that, I don't know. I love these things. What is something in your life that you spend a silly amount of money on?
Oh, geez, coffee cups. I love coffee cups, and I spend a ridiculous, and then I have too many. Yeah. But I actually pick a coffee cup depending on my mood that day. So I need a variety, because some days I'm not in a good mood.
You're preaching to the choir. Someone was over for coffee the other day, and I have like a bit of a bougie coffee setup going on. You've seen it. And I was like, what's your mug style today? And she looked at me and she's like, oh, you get me. And I was like, do you need one that is angled like this or angled like this, or you can hold with your hand like this? And she's like, oh, you're hilarious. And I was like, it's a thing. I totally get this.
Yeah.
I love that. What's your secret guilty pleasure way to decompress?
I don't know if it's a guilty. I'm not gonna say that one.
You can, man. It's a rated R podcast.
Let's just I'm a very sexual person. So,
okay, yeah.
Okay. I like that. Ride my horse, dance in the kitchen by myself. Yeah.
Awesome. I love you. What purchase of $100 or less that you have made recently has most positively impacted your life?
Geez, you're really getting good on these ones, hey? There is a book called The High Five Journal. It's written by Mel Robbins. Yeah. And I love it. I write it in every day. Yeah. So yeah, I really like it.
And what is an unusual habit or an absurd thing that you love?
An absurd, unusual habit. What do I do? I don't know. These are good questions. An absurd thing that I love. Well,
or like an unusual habit you have.
You'd have to ask my boyfriend that question. I don't even know. I don't know. My son would probably know. Oh, being inappropriate. Yeah, I think it's a habit because it just happens. I don't really have a filter, and then I say something inappropriate, and I think it's hilarious, but not everybody does. So
the mind of a 12-year-old boy.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Mom. Yeah. So
that is awesome.
Yeah.
Renee, thank you so much for being here. You are such a rock star and have fought so hard to get here. And I hope that this conversation hits somebody in the feels, that somebody learns something from it, or just looks at their meal a little different next time they go to look at it. But also, if they know someone who has an eating disorder, that they'll have a different level of love and grace for them.
Yes.
An understanding of what it is that they're going through.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So thank you. Please reach out to, OA, to either of us. All the contact information is in the show notes. There's also going to be a really fun giveaway, little freebie for you if you go to the show notes and click the link. Please listen wherever you hang out with your podcast, wherever you listen to your podcast, on Spotify or iTunes, wherever they are, and we'll see you again here in a couple weeks.